Hello, hello. This is Christina Byron. You're watching Black Tea News. Hello, hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I'm host Christina Barr, and today we are going to be talking about Joy Reid sparring with, and it was a spar, was not an interview, with Byron Donalds. God bless him for going on to her show because she's combative and she definitely does not like Black people who don't think like her. And she makes it very clear. She thought there was kind of an unfair assessment from statements that Byron has made in the past or whatever, but she kind of glossed over it. I'm sure he had examples. And but anyway, we're going to be talking a little bit about that interview. He particularly mentioned CRT at the end, and she is a big defender of it and a gaslighter for it, and someone who I'm sure has bought into the ideology because she brings it up quite a bit and has praised it. If you've been with me for a while, you know I've talked about Joy Reid and CRT before in the past. So we'll be talking about that. Also, Parade, this all-inclusive like lingerie company, I guess, has put out an ad, and people are reaming on one of the models because she's huge and it doesn't look like she's fitting into her shoes. So I want to question this sort of fat pride society that's going to a place where it's going too far. There was also a report that came out the other day about how children, it's going to be recommended for them to get surgery or drugs to deal with their obesity. And I'm like, aren't there other things we could be doing instead of, chopping the babies up? But that appears to be, I don't know what we're into nowadays. So we'll be talking about that. Also, there's some hysteria going on because it was suggested that by some politicians that we could be getting rid of gas stoves or phasing them out or making people phase them out, I suppose is a more accurate sort of fear. So there's some denouncing of that, like it's not going to happen, but there's some politicians who are for it. So we'll talk about that all today. But before we jump into it, I want to encourage you guys to go to blacktnews.com, check out different articles on the website, different merchandise that we have on the website, different videos. As I was like looking at Joy Reid, preparing and working an article about her and CRT and stuff, and I was just going back into my older files, and I'm like, I know I did a video because I did an article about CRT and Kyle Rittenhouse and how his case highlighted about CRT, because at one point when Joy Reid was talking about the case, she's like, oh, this is why we need CRT. And I'm like, you might be wondering why she would say that. So I just kind of walk you through it. Like, what does CRT have to do with Kyle Rittenhouse and what we're kind of watching in real time? So I laid that out, and I'm like, I know I made a video about it. So I went in my YouTube channel. I'm like, oh, lo and behold, I did do a video on it. It's like 3 minutes long, which I made it 3 minutes long so I could put it on TikTok, and TikTok took it down. And there weren't any guns in it. I don't remember why they took it down. Maybe there was a flash or something that they took it down, but I specifically cut it and edited it so it could be to 3 minutes, and like they took it down. So that's that. But anyway, it's still on YouTube and Facebook somewhere. So I'll repost that because it's a good little 3-minute video that goes through that time and some of the ideology of CRT. But we're going to dive into it. But yeah, go check out different stuff that we have all kinds of goodies on the website. Now there's some people who are new subscribers, especially on YouTube. Thank you for hopping in here. Just in general. But yeah, there's all kinds of stuff in the archives you can go back and watch. So just keep up to date with that. Also, make sure you're dropping in your email on the website so you get updates when we have different emails so you know what's up. Check out different merch like the I'm Not the Victim You're Looking For. I love that shirt. Um, also got cool stuff like the "You Are Not That Special" mug, and also anyone who might be dropping in who's new. Because I did have a lot of people who jumped into my follower account after posting a couple things about gender identity and the phenomenon going on. I'm not a TERF. Anyone follow me because I'm a TERF. I'm really not a TERF. I'm really not a feminist, but and I'm also obviously conservative. So someone had just commented not too long ago, like they really liked a lot of my views, but they didn't like my views on abortion. And they said the video that I made was dumb. Which it was a video that just had some facts listed, but maybe they saw a couple other videos. And they said, well, I guess they probably read some of my responses to some people, and they said that women don't want abortion. Women get abortions because of unwantedness. They don't want the child, and you don't know what situations or circumstances they've been through, et cetera, blah blah blah. And then she said, you have a lot of good opinions, but your opinion on this is dumb. And to that, I just said, unwantedness isn't a good reason to kill your son or daughter, whether they're, in the room or outside the room for 3 months in either or scenario. So you're going to need some kind of reason that's more compelling than that to persuade me that it's wrong to kill another human being. You could prove that it's not like human and alive, but you can't do that. It's definitely human and alive. You can convince me or try to convince me that there's no inherent value to that person, but that is subjective, and I don't want you to be able to kill people based on your subjective opinion of their moral value. So I just don't think that's something that we should put on a scale and let that just be like something random or person to person. I think we can get into a lot of, like, I don't know, genocidal sort of scenarios if we just go by what people are feeling in the moment about each other. So yeah, just I'm not gonna stop having a plethora of pro-life videos, and as I gear up to come out with this baby, there's definitely going to be a lot of content on that subject, which I've already had a bunch of content on that subject before, especially on my TikToks. But if you've been following me for a while, I talk about the subject a lot. So just want to warn people. I appreciate people coming on and subscribing, and I hope you stay if you have a different opinion, and we can all have respectful conversations. But FYI, some I'm going to keep talking about, and you're going to have to come up with a better argument than what you say is dumb, because it wasn't. I think objectively what I said wasn't dumb, but you're just going to have to make a compelling case, and you didn't. So just want to throw that out there. Let's get into it. So I don't have a meme. I do have a funny picture to start things off with, a tweet that goes right into our stories. So there was a report or something or statement about gas stoves and how it could contribute to asthma. So I first saw Senator Scott Wiener mention it, and that was kind of jarring, because he's so pro, like, transing of the kids and other weird stuff, heinous kind of laws. And so when he is like, oh, we need to do stuff for pro the kids, I'm like, you have inconsistent values, sir. So AOC, I saw this tweet today, and I got the back-to-back set up for you. So someone said, I'll never give up my gas stove. If the maniacs in the White House come for my stove, they can pry it from my cold, dead hands. Come and take it. And AOC said, did you know that ongoing exposure to nitrogen dioxide from gas stoves is linked to reduced cognitive performance? which she didn't end with a question mark. So people have noted that AOC has a gas stove. So if that's true, um I guess it could explain some things about her. I mean, that doesn't explain why the rest of us aren't suffering from the same sort of deficiencies that she apparently has. But she got owned very, very fast about the stove situation. So people are having a couple laughs. So what's going on with the stove? Well, there was some alarm, and I even mentioned it. I think I put out a post today about it on Facebook, and there's debate. People are like, no, you don't need gas stoves, do electric. Someone was even with the fear mongering, like, don't you know you can turn on a gas stove and you won't even know, and the house will be filled with gas, and like that can't happen. But you don't get rid of everyone's gas stove because of a situation like that could happen, and has happened. I mean, one day accidentally hit the knob a little bit, and gas started leaking out, and I wasn't home for the longest time. My sister came home and there was just like gas. So yeah, that was not a cool thing that I did. Obviously an accident, but we lived to tell the tale. I still want a gas stove. I don't know if I've ever had, maybe I'm trying to think of the house we were in a couple of years ago, if that had an electric stove or not. I know my parents have one right now. Yeah, I think the one we've had an electric before, but when you don't have power, it sucks when you can't use it, or when it's really cold. One year, everything was like frozen, and we didn't have electricity, and we were living in like a rural area, and we were like we had a fireplace, but we did not have wood, and we were trying to use wet wood in it, because that was just kind of what was available outside, and it wasn't working out too well. I think we eventually got some kind of fire going, but it was rough. But we did have our gas stove, and so if a power grid goes out and you can't turn on your electric stove, people are noting it's good to have a gas stove to keep you warm, or be able to still use your appliances and still be able to cook or something, boil water. So there's always pros to cons of this stuff. But anyway, apparently they're not. The Washington Examiner did an article saying that that the agency chairman says that there's not actually going to be a ban. So I'll go ahead and read that to alleviate some fears. But I don't know. Too many people seem to be talking about it and throwing it out there. So I really wouldn't put it past anyone. And some concerns and conspiracies that people are saying is that they want you to have electric stoves and more electric stuff, period, that's you can control, and in some kind of event just kind of shut down easier. So I wouldn't put it past anyone. But the Consumer Product Safety Commission is not planning to ban gas stove. Its chairman said Wednesday, seeking to tamp rising political furor caused by another commissioner's comments earlier this week. I'm not looking to ban gas stoves, and the CPSC has no proceeding to do so, Chairman Alexander Hohen-Sark said in a statement. He said, though, that the commission is looking for ways to reduce related indoor air quality hazards. His remarks come after Commissioner Richard Trumkus Jr. said earlier this week that the agency plans to take action to address the pollutants, which have been linked to asthma and other respiratory problems. An option is on the table, Trumka told Bloomberg, describing the pollutants as a hidden hazard. His comments sparked a political frenzy, and House Republicans, newly in the majority, have already vowed to take action to block any proposed federal regulations. Senator Joe Manchin also took aim at the news, saying any proposed regulation would be a recipe for disaster. In October, the issued a request for information seeking public data on hazards associated with natural gas stoves and input for proposed solutions. A spokesperson for the agency told the Washington Examiner earlier this week the CPSC has started to work with voluntary standards organizations to examine emissions from gas stoves and address hazards caused by the appliances. To date, it has not proposed any new regulations. CPSC is researching gas emissions in stoves and exploring new ways to address any health risks, Hohensark said in the Wednesday statement. In this spring, we will be asking the public to provide us with information about gas stove emissions and potential solutions for reducing any associated risk. This is part of our product safety mission, learning about hazards and working to make products safer. Gas stoves, which are used roughly 40% of U.S. homes and are favored by many cooks, have been found to emit air pollutants such as nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, and other particulate matter at levels deemed unsafe by the Environmental Protection Agency and the World Health Organization. So I don't know if I believe them. Oh, I mean, I believe, I guess right now that there's nothing on the books, maybe. I can believe that, and that there's going to be no immediate sort of jump on it. But I don't know. I feel like people throw kind of the stuff out there to see what the response will be. And since there was a big reaction immediately, it's probably not something they'll move on quickly. That doesn't mean that they won't. So you guys can let me know what you think. Are you going to give up your gas stoves? Do you think that they're in danger? I think it's just something we always got to be on the lookout for, because so many people want to just regulate your life, period. And so there's so many people who believe in so much dogma with, being environmentally friendly, that if they feel that they have a heroic mission, they won't, at the end of the day, care what you feel about your stove, even though, like I said, in some kind of storm or issue when you don't have power, it's a lifesaver when you can use your gas stove. It really, really is. Next, let's go ahead and talk about Byron Donalds on MSNBC with Joy Reid. So it was contentious. They had a contentious back and forth. The Democrats, the media is really an extension of the Democrat Party. They like to pretend like they don't take sides, which I think they kind of took that mask off a bit during the Trump administration, but still some insist that they don't take sides, but he was just so awful that they had to do something. Well, they've been awful. And Joy Reid is someone who's particularly awful. And I don't foresee that changing anytime soon. So she sparred with him about Social Security, his the stunt with them electing him or nominating him for speaker, but she really pressed him about. So I have some clips of that. And then it ended with a CRT discussion, which is something I really want to talk about. So let's go ahead and watch these few clips, and you guys can watch, the full interview at a different time on your own. But let's at least go through a couple of these clips that I have.
Let's go into some of the other things. You were nominated for speaker.
Yeah.
You've been in Congress one term.
Yes.
What were your qualifications to be Speaker of the House?
Well, look, I think my colleagues, they recognize my leadership, and they've seen it in many leaps and bounds.
Can you give
even
specifics?
In one term. Secondarily, I've served before at the state level, now here at the federal level.
What were your specific qualifications to be Speaker?
I actually understand budgets. I understand what the long-term ramifications are.
What is the job of the Speaker? Hold on a second. We have to have a conversation.
I'm trying.
You're
cutting me off.
Hold on. What is the job of Speaker? Can you explain what the job of Speaker is? Because the job of Speaker doesn't have to do every single member of Congress has served in. Okay, what is the job?
The job of the Speaker of the House, number one, is to actually make sure that the Congress is operating on time. It largely sets the agenda for the conference. For the entire House of Representatives. It actually engages in negotiations with the Senate and the White House on major issues, key issues. The Speaker of the House has security clearances that most members do not have. You're number three, obviously, in the line to the presidency, and there's much, much more. The job is critical. Oh, and by the way, the Speaker of the House is also responsible for security.
And fundraising.
Of course.
And so you've been there one term, and you're saying that you would be prepared after one term to do the job that Speaker Pelosi and others who were in leadership. You ran for leadership, and you lost that leadership race to the congresswoman, a congresswoman who ended up being in leadership, right? So you were not elected to leadership, but you believe that though you've never served in leadership ever, and you've only served one term, that you believe you were qualified.
So, I like how he mentioned, like, oh, by the way, the speaker's also supposed to provide security, because obviously there were some snafus when January 6th happened, and people question why there wasn't, what kind of security kind of collapses happened that day. So that was a nice little dig, but she kept saying, what are your qualifications? He starts listing them, and she's like, no, about speaker. And so she interrupted him a lot, and you'll see that, but it went on like the entire sort of back and forth with them. Just absolute no respect for this man. Because men like Byron Donalds are terribly inconvenient to people like Joy Reid, who just want to paint the political opposition that she does not like as just being terribly, terribly racist. She's allowed people to come on her show and say terribly, terribly racist things, particularly like Michael Dyson, for example, but there are others. People come on her show, said horribly, horribly, horribly racist things about Black conservatives, Black Republicans, etc. And while if people called out, like, she used to have a blog and she wrote some things that people deemed as homophobic, and she's like, I was hacked. And like, you really expect people to believe that? Or seriously? So she just has no respect for this man, and you can see it, the way that she's trying to press him, and he's answering the questions and she's pretending like he's not. But she's trying to look like a hard-edged reporter, really, coming at him. And that's not always necessary. You press when people aren't answering your question. He was literally like answering her question. So let's just keep watching.
Because you got into it back and forth with a fellow congresswoman who was critical of the nomination, because it definitely looked like they were looking for a response to Hakeem Jeffries in you.
No, that was not any.
Because you've literally been there for one term, so you've never been in leadership. I'm asking you the question.
I'm answering.
That's what. And the reason I'm asking that, I'm just going to ask you this question, is one of the things that, I don't know that you said it, but members have said, is that they wanted to highlight the diversity of the conference. There are 4 African-American members in the House caucus, the Republican caucus. There are 56 members in the Democratic caucus. So it's more diverse. There are more African-American members just that are House committee ranking members. They're at the same number that are actually members of the entire Republican House caucus. Right. So do you not believe that the idea was to make a diversity statement by nominating him?
Well, actually, first, that was not the idea, because I was in the room when the decision was made by people who chose to nominate me. That never came.
And you've still not explained how you were qualified. You've never been in leadership.
Are you going to let me answer your question?
Sure, tell us.
Over me? Okay. Number 2, now let's go back. The reality is that a lot of members actually do believe in my ability to lead. They do. Am I to be despised from my youth because I've served one term, when members know that I have the ability to engage other members through the conference? But it's even bigger than that. Listen, we were at an impasse last week in our speakership elections. We got that done. Kevin McCarthy is now Speaker of the House. At the same time, I was working with members on both sides of our conference to make sure that we can get the job done, and we did. And that's the only thing that matters.
Yeah, so he did list his qualifications. It is our opinion about the leadership thing, and it can be a fair opinion, whatever, but he did answer her question. They're aware of the fact that the games that the 20 holdouts were playing was to consolidate more power. It was to get McCarthy to consent to, or make concessions rather, to different requests that they had. So they weren't going to relent. You had Gates, who was like far more, nah, I don't want McCarthy ever. But Byron Donalds, through different interviews, and Chip Roy and other folks, let it be known that they were willing to negotiate, but they were going to play the games until they won. So it was very frustrating to a lot of people, and it was concerning to a lot of people because we just didn't know exactly how it was going to go, or if there were people who were just never going to vote for McCarthy, period, and they didn't have some kind of plan. But at the end of the day, Byron and Chip Roy and other folks got what they wanted out of McCarthy. So I guess kudos to them, because they achieved what they at least want to achieve, and nominating other people other than McCarthy, and voting for other folks, and not getting him to the majority until they got what they wanted is what they wanted to do. So Byron didn't want to be speaker. He already said that in other interviews, and I've played on the show. So it wasn't something that interested him long term. And it may be something he wants to do in the future, but it's not something currently that he wants to do. So that's not even like an argument that's really worth having. As far as the reasons why they decided to pick him, well, he didn't go into, but he says that they had other reasons. But again, they were just picking other people until McCarthy relented in what they wanted, and they went like, was it 15 on ballot? The 15th time they voted, they finally got McCarthy in. So kind of unnecessary back and forth with that.
Last question. We are out of time. I'm just going to go through a few of your voting record items, because you've made some statements about me, about what I've said, and saying that I have tried to accuse you of being less black than other folks, which I think is an unfair statement, but that's fine. I'm going to go through some of your voting record. Right. You voted to reject the Arizona and Pennsylvania electors on January 6th.
The whole thing's going to have to play again, but totally not an unfair statement. As I said, Joy Reid does not like people like Byron. She's allowed people to come on her show and say the most racist, vile things about other people who think differently. She herself, when Tim Scott first came into office, she implied he was going to be like a Uncle Tom, and so she's not a good person, but she's a racist herself. So totally think that's fair. I know they talked about Byron Donalds on her show and other platforms as the Black Caucus, which is primarily made out of Democrats, didn't want his participation. He's obviously a Black person, but they don't appreciate his perspective, the things that he votes on. So when people talk about diversity, they of course do not mean diversity as far as opinions. They mean diversity as far as, oh, you got a different skin color, but they reject and resent people who do not fall in line with the proper ideology.
You've defended. Last question. We are out of time. I'm just going to go through a few of your voting record items, because you've made some statements about me, about what I've said, and saying that I have tried to accuse you of being less black than other folks, which I think is an unfair statement, but that's fine. I'm going to go through some of your voting record. Right. You voted to reject the Arizona and Pennsylvania electors on January 6th. Right. Donald Trump himself has implied that the reason that Pennsylvania was illegitimate is because of Philadelphia. That's a statement about African-American voters. Hold on a second. You don't believe that Donald Trump's rhetoric led to the storming of the Capitol, even though we've just had a January 6th commission that said it did. You said that you questioned the election itself. You voted against impeachment. You voted against creating an independent commission for the January 6th account. On voting laws, you defend voting laws that said getting rid of ballot harvesting is a good thing that we did. So you've defended the Florida voting laws. You've actually laws in the country. The Florida voting laws? Florida election laws are the best election laws in the country. And go ask Arizona, go ask California, go ask New York. We do it the best. Okay, all right.
They do it obviously better than Arizona and New York and some other places. And especially with the last election, them having such a high population, which people left other states to go to Florida, they were able to get their counting done, very quickly compared to what Arizona was going like a full other week after the election. So he's not wrong that they have a good system worked out in Florida. They just do. So I know that's an inconvenient fact for Joy Reid. As far as other stuff, the impeachment measures that they had, you can have different opinions on it, but we covered the impeachment at the time, but the first impeachment process. The articles just didn't make sense. It just seemed like it was more out of petty spite that they concocted them. And the rhetoric for the January 6th, the peacefully protest stuff, what Trump said and tweeted, there wasn't any kind of, hey, go and march and destroy the Cap. There wasn't any sort of call to violence, and people can read into whatever they're going to read to. We can go back and forth about that, but just because you had a committee that was obviously biased toward a particular perspective does not mean that Trump called for, the rhetoric called for what happened, because there's still like no evidence presented that is some kind of actual call to action. So let's watch the last thing.
You've defended and actually have co-sponsored 2 pieces of legislation opposing critical race theory. What is critical race theory in your view? Oh,
critical race theory actually comes from critical theory. And essentially what it does at the graduate level, it talks about the implications of racial policies in the past in American history, their impact on society today.
The impact on law.
Hold on. The issue with critical race theory, if you distill it down into K-12 education, is you do not have the ability to have the detailed conversation of critical race theory at the graduate level. And so here's my question. If it seeps down into K-12 education, is it stuff that students are not prepared to be dealing with? Shouldn't students just be learning about reading, writing, and arithmetic?
And so you don't believe that students should be learning about the racial history of the country? Because critical race theory is not taught. Hold on. Critical race theory is not taught in a single K through 12 school.
That's not true.
One moment. It's a legal theory that's taught in law schools. Okay, we're going to have to come back and continue this conversation. We're actually literally out of time. They're telling me you have to go.
Okay.
Critical race theory is not taught in our schools. And learning about racial history actually would be good for
It's your show. I'm going to give you the last word, but we're going to do this again.
We can come back. Byron Donalds, thank you very much.
So, first of all, I just want to say that I think he's very good at this, because she's obviously like a hostile host, and he's doing a good job still, getting his word out, being combative, not going too far. I just think he at least represented himself very well in that hostile situation, and he's very articulate, and I know he just said he didn't really want to be speaker, and you're not going to jump into something that early when you have only been around, like, this is your second term, but I don't know, he could maybe consider it one day, because I think a lot of like GOP leadership really lack proper communication, communicate their values, etc., and don't do very well in interviews, especially when they're pressed, especially when there's a hostile sort of host who obviously doesn't like you. But he did well. So I think he's got a bright future, in my opinion. Now, as far as CRT, he's correct. It does stem from critical theory. And as far as Joy Reid saying that it's not taught in K through 12 schools, is absolutely not true. And so Joy Reid is someone who continuously defends CRT, pushes it a lot, has had Kimberly Crenshaw, one of the co-founders CRT, on her show. And so Kimberly Crenshaw was like, I know if it was in schools, because she's one of the co-founders, right? But one thing Kimberly Crenshaw has done is she's participated, and I've shown you guys like this before, she's participated in events that highlight critical race theory insight. So no, they do not teach the whole complex legal theory in K through 12 schools, but they do critical race theory insights and embed principles of it within school. And these are events that she has actively participated in, so she knows that there's elements at least that they do put into critical race theory. So in critical race theory, an introduction, it talks about how there's an activist element to it, activist dimension to it, and there's also different spin-offs that you'll see. Like people don't want to claim Ibrahim X Kendi so much now, because even though a lot of people have supported him, like mainstream people support him, he says some like off the wall crazy stuff. White fragility was a huge craze. People want to say, well, that's not CRT. Those are like spinoffs of it. Robin DiAngelo, it says she teaches CRT. She's into all that stuff. They are spinoffs of it. So if you read the writings and something like Critical Race Theory Introduction, it talks about how there are spin-offs, but they do incorporate a lot, a lot of stuff within schools. But this is not even the problem that it's just in schools. You see elements of it being taught in the military, elements of it on TV shows. So it's very mainstream, or at least people are trying to very much so make it mainstream. But I have one prominent example. I don't have the clip up for you guys. I did like repost it recently on my Twitter. But the superintendent of Detroit Public Schools said that they do incorporate CRT within the curriculum in social studies and English, and they're trying to put it in the other subjects as well, that they are very intentional about it without putting the insights, embedding it, etc. So there's not a lot of, if you're expecting or dreading to go to your kid's school, like popping him one day to spy on him or something, and you're expecting that you're going to see CRT, critical race theory 101 on the board, like that's not what's going to happen. It's not what's going to happen. But are they going to incorporate and teach certain things within it? Yeah, sure, absolutely. And that is happening, and admittedly so with Kimberly Crenshaw, and admittedly so with the Detroit superintendent. And if you're not from Michigan, everyone knows Detroit is a big city, right? Like Detroit is, you think about Michigan, I mean, I went to the Philippines and they're asking about Detroit and cars and stuff. People know Detroit is big. So it's happening in other places as well. So it's just not true that it's not in any schools. I was going back and forth with someone under this clip, and they said, I'm not aware of one instance, a single instance where CRT is in school. So I provided that clip, and they don't want to take their L, but it's obviously an L. I'm like, here's a pretty big instance, because again, that is a superintendent of Detroit Public Schools. So she keeps trying. The issue is that, and so people ask, why shouldn't you be able to teach critical race theory? I went back and watched, gosh, I can't remember his last name, Malcolm and Ben Shapiro. They were on the Bill Maher show. They were talking about critical race theory. And so Ben Shapiro, who did go to law school, he said he was taught about it. So he starts breaking it down, and he goes into a explanation of CRT. And then they turn to Malcolm, and Malcolm's like, no, I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you that it's like racism is baked into our institutions, and because it's just within our DNA at this point. And I'm paraphrasing his paraphrasing, but at this point of time, our institutions are kind of so corrupted that you have to tear down those institutions and remake them, etc. So Malcolm said that he agreed with that, and then through their conversation, then the conversation just went downhill. Especially as Malcolm kept trying to paint it as teaching history, and Ben's like, no one has a problem with teaching history, but it's the lens at how they want to teach, not just history, but also how the world currently is. So it is a worldview, and in Words That Wound, that's another CRT book, it talks about how critical race theorists they don't have an objective worldview, they have a subjective worldview. So if you're like, well, why can't we just teach this stuff in school? It's just history. It's not history if it requires activism, and if people have a subjective worldview. It's an ideology. First of all, it says theory right in the name, so it's not like an objective, true thing. It's something that people are still kind of figuring out, but it is an ideology, just plain and simple. So people just think it's like about teaching MLK and segregation and other grittier things that normally aren't talked about, or may not be talked about, or people think aren't talked about, which, by the way, I'm 33, and we definitely learned about different history and grittier stuff in school. And people mention all these different events, like, well, did you learn about this? Did you learn about this? Did you school is only a certain amount of time of your life. And I don't know a lot of people who loved going to school. I did very well in school. I didn't love going to school. Though I was a great student, I just didn't wasn't, something I loved to do. I loved to excel. I loved getting those good grades. I loved my parents going to parent-teacher conferences, and my one teacher was like crying because I was so great. And then my dad started crying. Like I was that child. So even though I enjoyed doing well academically, I did not like get up in the morning and say, oh, I want to go to school and learn. Wasn't my thing. Wasn't my thing. So if we're talking about piling on like more stuff than there's only so many hours in a day, and all these people saying, I didn't learn this, I didn't learn this. What's hindering you now from picking up books and learning things right now as an adult? There's a ton of stuff that I learned as an adult that I'm like, well, that would have been interesting to know then. But I have more means and capability, especially now with so much stuff being readily available on the internet. You can buy all kinds of books, go on Amazon, find a history book or something, get it, watch all these documentaries, etc. There's so many ways you can access information. So as an adult, like, what's keeping you from learning stuff now? Like right now. But there's only so much time you have in a day to teach kids through each grade period, But no one is saying we don't want people to learn historical accurate things, and we want them to learn about history and math and reading and science. But do we want to, someone asked me, like, how come we can't teach people different perspectives? I'm like, it's not that people are teaching CRT about CRT, is that people are teaching within the perspective of CRT. So it makes things a little awkward when you're going into this oppress kind of situation and injecting all of this kind of bitterness into these children who are trying to learn multiplication or something. So I recommend going to the website. I do have quite a few readings on a few articles on CRT. Like I said earlier, I had a video that I did about Joy Reid and CRT, and just because she had said during the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, like, oh, we really need CRT, and also related, like, how does all that kind of relate to it? But it's not true that it's not in any of the schools. Again, you're not going to go see CRT 101 and learn like the whole thing in depth, great detail if you go to your kid's school, but you are going to have different insights incorporated. And Kimberly Crenshaw knows that because she's participated in these events. She said a different story on Joy Reid. Last thing I want to say, I think before moving on though, is that another thing that was funny about the interview with Crenshaw was that she was saying, people are saying it's a Marxist ideology. Like, it's not a Marxist ideology, is it? So then Crenshaw goes in to start explaining it, and she never denies that it's like Marxism. And then Joy Reid brings it up again, and she never denies that it's like Marxism. But as Byron Donalds said, it is like related to critical theory and all that stuff. There's a tie to it all. So just go read Critical Race Theory, an introduction. And again, it is a big activist movement. It is not really about educating your kids about what happened in the Civil War and all that stuff. That's not what it's about. And at the same time, and I know I said that would be my last thing I would say, it's amazing to me that how much focus that people have on history and racism and systemic racism and all these different things, but then they want to twist history or not learn about particular things accurately. So like if people say, well, what's an example of systemic racism today? And the Republicans or whatever will ask for stats and evidence, etc. Systemic racism is such a broad kind of catch-all, sort of, that it's almost impossible to not. How the definition is, it's kind of hard for something not to exist. So systemic racism, if there's some kind of racist origin, and the intention today doesn't have to be that it's racist. There just has to be some kind of disparate impact. So with that being said, I think the most obvious example today in 2023 of systemic racism would be abortion. Would it not be? Because you had, especially in America, we had these eugenicists who were into it. You had Margaret Sanger, who was the founder of Planned Parenthood. Then you had, which, she wasn't, to her credit, she wasn't as crazy as for abortion that other people were. But when Planned Parenthood was taken over by Alan Goodmacher, who was also a eugenicist, and he was much more fond of abortion. So he was also a eugenicist. And today, when you hear people talk about abortion, they're like, women of color particularly need abortion. And you can say, well, that's because they want them to be able to access their dreams and all this other stuff. You cannot just have these conversations and forget that they're killing their children. Like, that's what it is. So they're like, you're saying Black women particularly need access to kill their offspring. So we're going to talk about systemic racism. Like, that's a huge one. Or when we talk about systemic racism, the first thing that they usually mention is redlining. Who's the president under that? Like that, that's like FDR stuff. So there's quite a few things that, and maybe I'll have to do an article, video, something about it, of policies that Democrats push today that have some kind of racist sort of root to it. So there's a lot of inconvenient things that they want to sort of forget. And then you talk about teaching accurate history, and they're like, oh, well, there was a party switch. I'm like, that's not true. That's not true. So it's about ideology. It's not about accurate history at all, not in the least bit. So let's move on. So, gosh, so there's this ad that's getting a lot of talk right now. So Parade does lingerie for all-inclusive body types. So now they're doing 5X. And so this is like one of their ad pieces. I'm pretty sure the one in the middle is a man. People are talking about that black chick, like, that black, she is fine. That's what a lot of commentary, at least what her is. It doesn't look like her bra, kind of. This commentary is about shoes don't seem to fit. So yeah, there's that. So let's get the elephant out of the room. I'm a big girl myself. So still, I don't advocate for body positivity, sort of. And when they say body positivity, they mean like being pro obesity, or at least that's what society is gunning toward and painting. And the way I feel about it is you got to be comfortable within your body to some extent, because your size, whatever you are for the moment that you are anyway. So there's no point in sort of beating yourself down every time you look in the mirror when it's fully 100% on you to change the way that you look. So if someone else calling me a fatty or something, it's like, you're just kind of pointing out the evidence. but if I want to change it or not change that, like that's on me. All that power is on me. But there really is a weird sort of push today with all sorts of ads. Now this is a company that's selling underwear, so I get them selling like underwear, and they're going up to 5X. So yeah, they can have those sort of ads. But it is weird to me to have. It doesn't look like the shoes fit. I mean, she got the feet in there, and sometimes when you're doing like runway stuff, or you show up to some kind of thing, it's hard. You don't always have your size and stuff available, but you know? I'm kind of like, I just, like, obviously that was going to be a thing that people are going to notice and start talking about, rather than the underwear available for folks at that size and other stuff. So, but sometimes people just want to get clicks and conversations. And so it's definitely getting clicks and conversations. But even like exercise ads, I've seen like ads that were like, get ready for your beach body. And it was like not healthy looking bodies or big bodies. So you can be comfortable in the skin that you're in, but it could, because again, you are your size, you ate yourself to that size, etc. Get the full power to get to a different size. It's all in your hands and not someone else's. But the push that we have in society is just very weird. Very weird. It even like was weird during the pandemic that people weren't pushing to be healthy. Like, we knew that obesity was a core morbidity, and that was not the focus on it. And even when people did have conversations, the CDC or whatever had conversations, they just kind of acknowledged, well, it takes time to lose weight. Yeah, and you lock people down for 2 years, but you also like close the gyms. There's just a lot of things that didn't make sense the least bit. But it was like they didn't want to talk about any sort of prevention methods or any sort of ways that you could make your body healthier. They only wanted to keep everyone shut in and wear masks and all that stuff. And until there was some kind of vaccine, then you get the vaccine. And of course, there's all kind of conversations related to the vaccine and its effectiveness and what it could be doing to folks now. Though I think people are kind of overdoing it with the anytime someone drops down, they're like full conspiracy on that. I'm like, you could at least like try to verify before you like put people in montages, I think. But there are concerns. But that's what they wanted to push, but they did not make some kind of push. Like, they should have had like Michelle Obama, how she kept trying to do those healthy campaigns and stuff. There should have been like an active push to say, America, get up and while you're home, like get a Peloton bike or something. Do you guys remember how mad people were when there was an ad for a Peloton bike, when like a boyfriend or husband or somebody got their wife a Peloton bike? I don't even know why that commercial was so triggering to so many people. But then after lockdowns, people were like, oh, I bet you wish you had a Peloton bike, or your husband had got your Peloton bike. I don't get this. This is just of course gonna inspire conversations like this. Which, by the way, there were other pictures from the backside. I did not want to show you guys, but there's a Yahoo article in case any of you want to look that up yourself. I'm sorry, I'm plugging up my laptop, so there's a little noise in the background. Didn't realize it wasn't plugged. So on the contrast, though, there was a report the other day that CBS reported, and some other people were talking about it, but I got the CBS article for you guys. It suggested that for children who are obese, to treat them with drugs and surgery. So this article, consider drugs and surgery early for obesity in kids. New guidelines say waiting doesn't work. Children struggling with obesity should be evaluated and treated early and aggressively, including with medications for kids as young as 12 and surgery for those as young as 13. Gosh, they said aggressive. That is aggressive. According to new guidelines released Monday, the longstanding practice of watchful waiting or delaying treatment to see whether children and teens outgrow or overcome obesity on their own only worsens a problem that affects more than 14.4 million young people in the US, researchers say. Left untreated, obesity can lead to lifelong health problems, including high blood pressure, diabetes, and depression. Waiting doesn't work, said Dr. Huma Enley, a co-author and first guidance on childhood obesity in 15 years from the American Academy of Pediatrics. What we see is a continuation of weight gain and the likelihood that they'll have obesity in adulthood. For the first time, the group's guidance sets ages at which kids and teens should be offered medical treatments such as drugs and surgery, in addition to intensive diet, exercise, and other behavior and lifestyle interventions. So the director of the Center for Healthy Weight and Nutrition at Nationwide Children's Hospital, in general, doctors should offer adolescents 12 and older who have obesity access to appropriate drugs, and teens 13 and older with severe obesity referrals to weight loss surgery. Those situations may vary. Surgery, like, I know people get surgery for that stuff all the time, but there's always complications with that. You can just buy your kids healthier things, take the time to cook more nutritious stuff, and make kids go out and exercise, etc. But like putting them under the knife, that is intense, and that's amazing. That is the guidelines that they're recommending now. But at the same time, they're saying do this for the kids, but there's no sort of real push for adults in sort of a cultural way to get themselves right. I mean, people talk, weight loss is a huge industry. People talk about it all the time. Talk about diets and stuff all the time, but there is a huge sort of mainstream push to accept and have health. You're healthy at any weight. Like that's a big thing going on now. So I don't know, these two kind of contrasting viewpoints are pretty interesting. But if you don't interject some kind of healthier lifestyle, people will just fall out of it anyway. So you got to figure out how they kind of got that way and what you can to kind of undo it. At the same time, I don't know if it was last week or a week ago or 2 weeks ago, we talked about how someone who used to work for Coca-Cola actually lobbied to make it so that food stamps would pay for Coke and like pop and stuff. And so they would work with different civil rights groups, or, and they would donate different money to give grants and programs and stuff, so that when somebody tried to come for the SNAP benefits and say that they couldn't pay for pop and all these really sugary drinks, they would say that it's racism, because this is a good way for poor people to get the calories. And then they would get scientists or whatever to do studies that would say things like, oh, the sugar is not that bad. So there's a lot of sort of systemic issues going on. And if you're a parent and articles like that concern you and you're considering, should I get my kid under a knife or something, just I would take the time to just try to encourage some natural remedies, because you don't know what could ultimately be the push behind suggesting these drugs and suggesting putting kids under a knife, because there's not a lot of people in this world who do things out of the kindness of their hearts and out of consideration for you and your family and their well-being. There's so many people who lobby. There's so many people who get money, and even studies that you see aren't always done with the best intentions or in the most ethical sort of means, because so many people have an end game and a goal. So if you're concerned about your kid and their size and stuff, you just gotta encourage a healthier kind of lifestyle. Like my parents would try to get us to do stuff and work out sometimes, and we just didn't like going outside. video games and other kind of stuff. I mean, we did like play, games sometimes, like red light, green light, and other stuff like that. But I mean, we're not like my nephew, my nieces. They love like running out, going outside and playing around and all that kind of stuff. And he still likes playing video games. Don't get me wrong, but my parents would be like, go outside, and we start crying. So, but at the same time, people cook food that's not always the greatest because it's cheap and easy. And so, if you kind of live by, it's got to be like a whole kind of lifestyle change. So, as people have gotten older in my family and have seen like different health situations, we've made different adjustments or trying to make different adjustments. My mom is always like walking at night to slim down. My sister took the initiative to pay for my dad. He's on some kind of program with certain foods. And so there's an exercise bike not too far from me. Like, when you're older, hopefully you learn from your mistakes, but parents, try to make your kids have some kind of healthier lifestyle. It's not just about waiting and seeing. I don't understand if that's like a thing that people did, just waiting to see if people grow out of it. A lot of people don't grow out of things. They have to kind of be introduced to different habits. So, but don't put your kids under their knife at 12 and 13 or whatever for surgery. Don't do that. Send them to fat camp or something. I don't know. Don't give them drugs. Don't let these people drug up your child. Don't let them do that. Anyway, I thank you guys for watching today. I've obviously never been to fat camp, but I don't know what goes on in fat camp. I just mentioned it. Maybe fat camp's not great. But anyway, I thank you guys for watching today. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Please go to blacktnews.com to check out different content on the website, different articles on the website. Check out different merch that we have on there. Like the pro-choice men are sus, as in suspect. We got black tea mug, and I got a denounce white supremacy, defeat Joe Biden shirt with a list of some of the racist stuff that he said on the back, said and done. So you guys can go ahead and check that on the website. And I'll see you guys tomorrow.